The silence inside the private hospital suite was heavier than grief itself. The most powerful businessman in the state, a billionaire whose signature had built cities and whose decisions had changed thousands of lives, lay connected to machines that could no longer promise tomorrow. Around his bed stood expensive lawyers, board members, and family members pretending to care, each secretly waiting for the reading of his final wishes. Then, with the last strength left in his fading voice, he looked toward a humble single father standing quietly near the doorway and made a shocking request that froze every heartbeat in the room. He wanted that ordinary man to marry his only daughter, or lose everything he had just inherited. No one understood why a dying CEO would place such an impossible condition on a stranger. Even more unbelievable was the answer the single father gave only moments later, an answer that changed every life in that room forever. Before we continue this unforgettable story, if you believe kindness, honesty, and second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone you love, and subscribe to Kindness Vault. Every act of support helps us bring more heartwarming stories that remind the world humanity still exists. The single father was named Elias Rowan, a hardworking school maintenance technician who had spent the last 8 years raising his 6-year-old son, Noah, after losing his wife during a difficult childbirth. Every morning before sunrise, Elias packed lunches, braided tiny shoelaces, kissed his sleepy son on the forehead, and worked 2 jobs to keep a modest apartment filled with warmth instead of luxury. His clothes were simple, his truck was older than some of his students, and his savings account barely survived unexpected bills. Yet everyone who truly knew him agreed that no wealthy person possessed a richer heart. Months earlier, fate had quietly connected Elias with billionaire CEO Victor Ashcombe. During a violent storm, Victor's luxury car had broken down on a deserted highway while returning from an important meeting. Every expensive vehicle drove past without stopping, afraid of the dangerous weather. Elias, returning from his evening shift, pulled over without hesitation. He spent nearly an hour fixing the damaged engine using borrowed tools while rain soaked every thread of his clothing. Victor offered him a large reward, but Elias politely refused, saying that helping someone in need should never carry a price. That simple sentence stayed with Victor long after they went their separate ways. Unknown to Elias, Victor had quietly investigated the man who had refused his money. Instead of discovering hidden ambition or greed, he found years of selfless kindness. Elias volunteered at homeless shelters, secretly paid school lunch debts for struggling children, repaired elderly neighbors' homes without charging them, and had never spoken publicly about any of it. Victor, whose own business empire had been built among ruthless competitors and selfish relatives, became fascinated by a man who measured success only by how many lives he could quietly improve. Victor's only daughter, Celeste Ashcombe, lived a completely different life. Highly educated and exceptionally intelligent, she had spent years preparing to inherit the global company. Yet despite her impressive achievements, she carried deep emotional scars. Her mother had passed away when she was young, and endless business responsibilities had slowly replaced family conversations with board meetings. Although she appeared confident before cameras and shareholders, loneliness followed her into every empty room. People admired her fortune but rarely cared about the person beneath the elegant suits and polished speeches. When doctors informed Victor that his illness had become terminal, he realized his greatest fear was not death itself but leaving his daughter surrounded by people who loved power more than family. Nearly every executive hoped to manipulate Celeste after his passing. Some distant relatives were already preparing legal battles over inheritance. Victor knew wealth could attract countless people while pushing genuine love farther away. Remembering Elias became impossible to ignore. Weeks later, Victor invited Elias to headquarters under the excuse of thanking him properly. Instead, he spent hours speaking with the humble father about family, responsibility, sacrifice, and hope. Elias never asked for employment, investments, or favors. He simply shared stories about Noah's dreams of becoming an architect and explained how losing his wife had taught him that every ordinary day with loved ones was more valuable than any fortune. Victor left that meeting convinced he had finally found the character he wanted protecting his daughter's future. Then came the heartbreaking hospital meeting where Victor revealed his astonishing final condition. According to his rewritten will, Elias would receive control of a charitable foundation worth hundreds of millions of dollars only if he agreed to legally marry Celeste. Otherwise, the foundation would be dissolved, its assets divided among corporate investors, and thousands of scholarship programs would disappear. The room erupted with disbelief. Lawyers protested. Executives whispered accusations. Family members looked at Elias as though he had secretly manipulated the billionaire. Yet Elias stood motionless, overwhelmed not by the money but by the impossible responsibility suddenly resting upon him. As everyone waited for an immediate answer, Elias quietly looked at little Noah sitting beside him, then toward exhausted Celeste, whose tear-filled eyes revealed embarrassment rather than expectation. He realized neither of them had chosen this impossible situation. They were both carrying burdens created by love and fear. Instead of accepting or refusing immediately, Elias gently explained that marriage could never become a business contract or an inheritance strategy. He said respect without love would eventually become another form of loneliness. He thanked Victor for believing in his character but admitted he could never promise a lifetime commitment based only on gratitude or wealth. Every listener expected Victor to become disappointed. Instead, something extraordinary happened. Victor smiled for the first time in weeks. What everyone else had misunderstood was that Victor had never truly wanted to force a marriage. He had only wanted proof that Elias valued people above fortune. The condition had been one final test of character, designed to expose greed if it existed. Elias had unknowingly passed the most important examination of his life. Victor immediately instructed his lawyers to remove the marriage requirement. The charitable foundation would belong to Elias regardless of his decision because he had proven he could never be bought. As for Celeste, Victor simply asked one final favor before closing his eyes. He requested that Elias never allow his daughter to face life completely alone after he was gone. Only hours later, Victor peacefully passed away. The weeks following the funeral became the hardest period any of them had experienced. Corporate executives challenged Victor's final decisions in court. News channels questioned why an unknown maintenance worker had inherited leadership of an enormous charitable foundation. Online rumors accused Elias of manipulation despite lacking any evidence. Reporters surrounded Noah's school. Friends disappeared. Strangers judged them daily. Rather than hiding, Elias devoted himself to fulfilling Victor's vision. Every dollar from the foundation continued supporting children's education, homeless families, struggling veterans, and hospitals serving low-income communities. Every financial record was made public. Every donation became transparent. Slowly, public suspicion transformed into admiration as people witnessed integrity replacing corruption. Throughout those difficult months, Celeste worked closely beside Elias. She handled corporate negotiations while he focused on humanitarian projects. Their friendship grew naturally through shared purpose instead of forced romance. Noah gradually began calling Celeste whenever he needed help with homework, and she discovered laughter returning to a home that had been silent for years. Elias, meanwhile, learned that strength sometimes meant allowing others to help carry pain instead of carrying it alone. Years passed before love quietly entered their lives. It arrived not through dramatic confessions but through ordinary mornings, shared responsibilities, comforting conversations, and countless acts of kindness witnessed by a little boy who finally felt surrounded by family again. When Elias eventually asked Celeste to marry him, there were no contracts, no inheritance conditions, and no billion-dollar promises. There was only genuine love built patiently upon trust, friendship, and mutual respect. Their wedding took place on a bright spring afternoon in a public botanical garden rather than an extravagant mansion. Hundreds of scholarship students whose education had been funded by Victor's foundation attended alongside homeless families, teachers, nurses, mechanics, and volunteers whose lives had been touched by the couple's kindness. Noah proudly carried the wedding rings, smiling brighter than the afternoon sun because he finally understood that family was not created by money but by people who chose one another every single day. The company Victor had feared would collapse became stronger than ever under Celeste's leadership, while Elias transformed the foundation into one of the nation's most respected charitable organizations. Every major decision they made honored Victor's final lesson, that character always outlives wealth. If this story has touched your heart and reminded you that kindness still matters, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a heartfelt comment, and subscribe to Kindness Vault so together we can spread stories that inspire compassion around the world. Glowing star special request: before this story ends, please comment with the words, "Kindness always wins," if you believe a good heart is worth more than any fortune. As the sun set behind the garden where their new life had begun, Elias looked toward the smiling faces surrounding him and realized the greatest inheritance Victor had ever given was never measured in billions of dollars. It was the courage to trust goodness in a world that often doubted it. Wealth had built buildings, but kindness had built a family. And long after every business headline was forgotten, the legacy of one dying CEO and one humble single father continued living inside every life they had chosen to live together, proving that the richest people are not those who own the most, but those who leave the most love behind.